axe thrower who's a fighter. He uses axes both in melee and ranged combat. You can throw something that you're not really supposed to. A throwing axe is different than an axe that you would use in melee combat, but you could throw your melee axe if you really wanted to. It just might not be as efficient as you might expect.
And could you use a throwing axe, for example, in combat?
Yeah, certainly you could use a throwing axe.
So that's the thing to keep in mind, guys. Once again, choices. We don't want to limit this game, just as we've said, from the beginning, say mages can't use this, or melee types can't use that, with the exception of the whole magic thing, of course. But in terms of weapons, hey, you want to be a mage and pick up a throwing axe and give it a shot? Yeah, you'll probably stink at it, but you can learn and get better with it. You won't have the abilities that you're going to learn from your class, but there's nothing wrong with you being able to pick up something and try to take a toss with it. Good question from Medic via Calio. Do you see on the disruption system, Ben?
No, who's this?
After you get disrupted, can you immediately start using that ability or a different ability?
There isn't currently a setting where you have an enforced cooldown on disruption. You have a disruption effect, which may include some kind of penalties like that. But there is only the inherent cooldown built into the usage of components. So cooldowns based on components, not based on abilities, because you build your own abilities. Component go into multiple abilities. Each component has its own cooldown you have to worry about. So that will be triggered when you use the ability, no matter if it succeeds or it fails. But there isn't a specific penalty of you might see in some of these other games when you get interrupted. There's just a time during which you can't use that because that's the penalty. In our case, the disruption effect is the penalty, and you're paying that by whatever bad thing happens to you.
Question from Garbrek that just is scrolled off. It's a really good one about UI, essentially. How will you make these attacks happen? Will it be simply push button? He quoted saying that, said that Dark Age of Camelot was in some ways that, or is it going to be more, more interesting? And, I don't want to, I can't answer that right now because frankly the game isn't finished. But one of the things that we are doing with this system, and you've seen what we've talked about essentially outsourcing some of the UI, but we're also doing other interesting things that with the UI that we will talk about at some point that we hope you guys will like. I didn't want to, let that question just scroll off the screen because it is an important one for us. Because one of the things that you have to keep in mind, just as we have to keep it in mind here, is that this system, just like the magic system, just like the progression system, has to be usable. It has to be, at the end of the day, it still has to be fun, even if there are parts of it that maybe not, are not as fun. And so whatever it takes to make it fun. And if the UI sucks, then the game sucks. It's really kind of simple as that. Since this is a game about RVR, if our ability to allow you to use your abilities, if we've done a really bad job in it, it doesn't matter what else we have in the game. The game just won't be fun. So that is a big focus for us. Joyous God, will there be gap closers, or will you be able to swap weapons on the fly? So, Ben's talked about this. We've mentioned this as well. Obviously, we need to do something to help you tanky type people wearing heavier armor, close on these sneaky mages with all their nasty power. And in terms of swapping weapons, that's something we've also said from the Kickstarter folks. You want to swap a weapon in combat, go for it. Be prepared to pay the penalty for it. You're not just going to be able to, hey, I'm going to swap all my armor in combat or swap my weapon, just go instantly. Now, can you make it quick? Can you get a sheath for it and set it up so it won't be a hugely, long delay? Yes. But if you're thinking that, hey, I just can swap weapons like that with absolutely no risk, nope, take your chance. Simple as that. Nastran question, tag targeting or tab target or action based. We've been very clear with this game about this game that this is not an action based game. It may have some action elements. It is not an action game. We've talked about projectiles being real projectiles, which is important to us. We've talked today about tab targeting being part of the system as well. So, you know, if you're looking for a pure action game, something like a Guild Wars 2, this is not that game. Kamer, will there be specific melee CCs like the ability to disarm enemies or throw sand in an enemy's eyes? What do you think, Ben?
That might happen.
Yes, of course. Disarming an ability, crowd control abilities. Of course, we need those in the game, and that's something I've also been very clear about. Crowd control is important. You know, we have to deal with Zergs. You have to deal with all sorts of things. And if we don't have meaningful crowd control, you know, in the game, then, well, we're screwed. So by the way, while we've got all of you sitting here and asking us questions, why don't we ask you a question? So you heard Ben talk about the disruption system. You heard me talk earlier on, or again, since the Kickstarter, about the interrupt system. How about yes, no? You guys interested? You think this is, you know, part of the fulfillment or possible fulfillment of keeping true to what I said about interrupts being important? Say yes or no in the stream, guys. We'll be looking for yays or nays.
There's one in here real quick about
Sure.
shields.
Oh, go.
A shield is considered a weapon. A weapon is considered a weapon. Weapons can be defensive. Shields can be defensive. Shields can be offensive. Weapons can be offensive. So there is it's fairly consistent between those two things.
Yes, good interrupt system.
Cool.
Awesome. So, and this is what you're going to be see. Oh, by the way, Tam Gross, yes, with some skepticism. Fantastic. Keep the skepticism coming. We have no problem with skepticism. You know, folks on our forums can attest right now, because I see so many names from our forums. I have no problem with skepticism. I don't have problems. Ben can tell you, since being here. Do I have any problems with skepticism here?
That's one of the things that's emphasized, actually, is that all of these things can be criticized, and more than anything, we care about how it actually works. So until we get these things into prototype and can actually play with them and can actually get feedback from our internal testers actually trying this stuff out, who don't have as close of a tie to it as we do, because we can get blinded by, spending so much time looking at it and thinking about it that we can't really see past that. So getting external feedback to us is very important. Communicating with our community very early is very important. So once it gets in the game, prototyped out, try it, see if it's fun, and then we are not objecting to throwing out anything that we create. So
exactly, and that's that's part of being a backer, folks. We guys on the forums can attest. We talk, we listen. We don't always agree. We don't always agree here. I challenge Ben all the time, and he challenges me, and Andrew challenges me. Other people challenge me, and I challenge them. It's part of the studio, and it's part of what we want to do with this game. So there will never be a problem here with skepticism. But thank you for that incredibly overwhelming, amount of yeses. And I hope, again, what this really proves, always proves as much as we can until the system is implemented, that, we intend to keep, whether it is a promise by me or, the design direction, the foundational principles. When I say, yeah, we're going to have a serious interrupt system, I mean, we're going to have a serious interrupt system. And, when I say we're going to try something different, we're going to try something different. That's part of being part of this team, and it's part of being, part of the family, essentially, as a backer.
Faster, we're based in Hawaii.
No, we're not based in Hawaii, but, these are the BSC days, so I thought I should, when I was on vacation, buy some BSE shirts. So, 2 more days of me, in Hawaiian shirts. Question on bandaging. Can there be some basic healing or simply staunching of bleeds? Yes, we have been very clear about that. You will not be a healer. You will not be able to heal yourself in the way you can in other games. But if you have some wounds, some bleeds on you, can you do some basic bandaging? Absolutely. It's the same thing as we said to crafters, right? That we don't want the crafters to have to do all the most basic tasks. If you want to be able to do a little bit, of a repair on your equipment, you should be able to do that. If you want to fletch basic arrows, if you have the components, you should be able to do that. And that philosophy applies to everything in the game. So, you're not going, to be able to heal yourself or heal other people unless you're a healer. But if you want to put, hey, you want to cauterize your wound? Go for it. Tealis, and I thought he was a big Lebowski fan. Actually, the Coen brothers, the films that they make, I am a huge, huge fan. Big Lebowski wasn't my favorite of their films. I'm a Miller's Crossing guy. Pacamos on knocking and holding arrows. We certainly want people to have, we certainly want this game, to have a pretty good, robust, archery system. So the idea that, you could walk around a little bit with the arrow knocked, really does fit in with that. You see Sinekin's question? Will more difficult to perform abilities allow you to infuse more effects into that ability, such as reactionaries and positionals?
So I'm not sure if I really understand this question.
All right, so that's why I was actually sending it over to you. So again, think of the whole point of the ability system is to be able to put different components together. So if there was a reactionary or a positional that depended on obviously something happening, right? Something specific happening, a different attack happening. Could you build an ability that, say, leads with something, then you have potentially, a slight delay in it, and then the reactionary positional fires off? Possibly, but then you also run the risk of saying, I just managed to screw myself over a little bit, right? Because I did this, two-step, I took a swing, and, I know that when I swing low, most people, tend to swing high. Could you build something that then follows it with, okay, now I'm going to, do a block high? It's a matter of how many components you can, put together in an ability, and that's something we'll be talking about. The best way to think about reactionaries, positionals still is as separate abilities.
If you want to do an example of how you would create a reactionary, you can say if you want something to go off now or if you want it to go off in response to something. So if you want to say, when I parry, I want to follow up with this, you would activate that as an ability that's not an immediate activation. So instead of immediately thrusting, you would say, I want to do a thrust in response to the next time I parry, and then that'll be a reactionary that will be on a time delay, on a reaction delay. So there's ways that you can create things that don't just immediately always take effect, so that you can kind of layer on these interactions to happen when specific conditions are met.
But if you do that, do understand that there's risk involved with that. It's not as simple as you're treating it as a passive that will always be, in the back, because that would make it a bit too simple. So understand that as you craft these more complicated abilities, there's always downside. So, the more complicated it is. Oh, I'm sorry, Sinekin. I thought that's exactly what you meant. Well, I managed to screw that one up. Sorry, man. Will we have uncommon weapons? Yes, we definitely want to have uncommon weapons. This is an uncommon game. I mean, look at the races. Look at the, class so far. We definitely want to have different weapons than you would find in the average, RPG or the average MMORPG. Go game live. Every time Mark wears a shirt like that, I feel he's going to run away to Hawaii with my $275. Now this is a $20 shirt, and frankly, I just got back from Hawaii for my big vacation of the year. So no worries about running away with it with your money, whether it's $275 or more. And I'm sure they're wondering why I'd answer a question like that. That's part of us being us. I'll certainly